The Washington Post, somehow clearly convinced that their weekly quota of stupid is yet to be filled, has really stepped up the crazy on this one. Hurricane Florence will have made landfall by the time this video has been posted, which upon arriving in the Carolinas this weekend will be the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the United States that far north in recorded history. Never mind the fact that according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, hurricane data has only been tracked since 1850 and only in a detailed and sophisticated manner since 1958, meaning that our data in this regard is profoundly myopic and only concerned with the most recent of human history, with no method of determining the size and scope of hurricanes preceding the minuscule length of time in which we have even had the technology available to track such things. No, none of that matters, because for WAPO, history started in 2016 when Cheeto Hitler won the presidency in spite of their and almost every other legacy media outlet's best efforts to the contrary. Another hurricane is about to batter our coast. Trump is complicit. Now I know right about now you're wondering, what the hell does any of this have to do with Donald Trump? Don't worry, we'll get there. Now I know your first instinct when you hear about an approaching hurricane is to blame, well, nobody, because it's a freaking hurricane. You know, the naturally occurring weather event, which occurred for millions upon millions of years preceding human civilization, and which will continue to occur for millions and millions of years following our inevitable AI-induced extinction. If we were to blame anyone, it would likely be that cruel witch Mother Nature, who is always doing her best to kill us at any given moment, which is why I'm rather glad to be in a shelter powered by coal and fossil fuels, with amenities that would make 19th century European monarchs jealous. However, the enlightened Washington Post has a different idea. Hurricanes are, you guessed it, Donald Trump's fault. I know this seems to be unprecedented levels of stupid, even for the Washington Post, but it's true. Yet when it comes to extreme weather, Mr. Trump is complicit. He plays down humans' roles in increasing the risks, and he continues to dismantle efforts to address those risks. It's hard to attribute any single weather event to climate change, but we'll do it. But there's no reasonable doubt that humans are priming the Earth systems to produce disasters. Now, this claim is so incredibly naive that it is difficult to know where to start debunking. First, let's start by accepting on its face the premise that there is no reasonable doubt that humans are priming the Earth's systems to produce disasters. This is largely based on the proven scientific fact that increased concentrations of carbon dioxide in the air result in higher temperatures. That being said, is there any data to support any action which Trump has taken which would impact carbon emissions in a manner significant enough in the 20 months in which he has been president, which would affect ocean temperatures in such a way as to make hurricanes more severe? Of course not. According to the Union of Concerned Scientists and the International Energy Agency, clearly two right-wing groups, the United States is responsible for 15% of global CO2 emissions. Now, this figure is by no means insignificant. That 15% of worldwide carbon emissions are a product of a country which contains only 4.4% of the global population is troubling. However, I am going to dare to ask the question which nobody on the left seems to even consider. As opposed to what? Let's assume that somehow, some way, Donald Trump imposed, by fiat through the EPA of course, an organization of unaccountable, unelected, and ideologically motivated bureaucrats, the absolutely suffocating legislation which would be necessary to reduce the United States carbon emissions to zero. Well, for starters, it would be absolutely devastating to the American economy and job market. Not that leftists could care less, but according to Energy.gov, the 2017 U.S. Energy and Employment Report finds that traditional energy and energy efficiency sectors today employ approximately 6.4 million Americans. These sectors increased in 2016 by just under 5%, adding over 300,000 net new jobs, roughly 14% of all those created in the country. But, like good little socialists, let's just completely disregard the job numbers. What's the point of being employed if Miami's underwater and the polar bears are dying, am I right? If the United States doesn't source its energy needs from home, it's going to look abroad because, believe it or not, strictly renewable sources of energy are completely economically unsustainable. Again, if economics is something you care to bother yourself with. To whom will we outsource our energy needs? Oh, you know, Russia, China, and Iraq, three countries which not only do not care at all about the environment, but are run by dictatorial regimes hell-bent on the utter destruction of not only the United States, but Western civilization in general, the degree to which such a thing still exists in Europe. I would have listed Venezuela, the most oil-rich country on Earth, but, well, you know. Americans are going to get energy from somewhere, and those sources which are not found within our own resource-rich borders are found in countries which would be happy to take our money and watch our economy crumble so that we satisfy the sensibilities of a small portion of our pathologically altruistic citizenry. Believe it or not, the insanity doesn't end with the Washington Post. In fact, the claims get even more delicious. In September 2017, The Guardian published an article unironically titled, "Irma and Harvey lay the cost of climate change denial at Trump's door." Again, I know what you're thinking. Irma and Harvey occurred in August of 2017. Surely they cannot be claiming that a president who hasn't even been in office long enough for a woman to conceive and deliver a baby is responsible for affecting ocean temperatures to such a degree as to substantially increase the strength of hurricanes. But again, you'd be wrong. The last bit of debunking has to do with the idea that hurricanes have been increasing in intensity due to the effects of climate change, something that alarmists throughout the dino media have been parroting since Al Gore's half-baked, mockumentary, and inconvenient truth. Again, only a cursory Google search is required to ascertain this is false. According to the National Hurricane Center, the frequency of hurricanes which have made landfall in the U.S. has actually been decreasing relative to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, until a recent bump in the 2000s and 2010s. Now, while this graph may seem to suggest that hurricane severity in recent years has been on the rise, notice the years in which the graph starts. The 60s and 70s, according to the previous chart, show a marked decrease in storms compared to the years which preceded it. In fact, the 40s is the decades in which the most hurricanes made landfall in the United States, oddly omitted by this graph. Also important to note, the previous graph only tracked hurricanes which made landfall in the United States, while this graph tracked all storms and hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. One of the greatest ways in which the media lies is by lying by omission, that is, the intentional overlooking of facts which are contradictory or inconvenient to their narrative. Now granted, this graph may only display data going back to '66 because that is the point at which such data collection became possible, but if that were the case, they should have been sure to point this out so as to not intentionally mislead the public. All this being said, it is still a proven fact that increased carbon emissions result in increased ocean temperatures. I'm not suggesting that we should not care about our climate, or that everyone should go out right now and buy a Hummer. However, the question at hand is not whether or not humans are contributing to climate change. It is to what degree. And the data suggests that it is to a degree significantly less substantial than the media and scientists whose grants, and therefore livelihoods, depend on climate change being substantially due to human interference, would have you believe. And the most important question is, what action, if any, can the United States government take to stop it? Until alternative forms of energy become both substantially more efficient and significantly more economically viable, I will continue to prefer energy independence and the employment of vast numbers of U.S. citizens to feeling good and depending on foreign despotic governments for our energy.